Welcome to Dark Vision, the place where every shadow hides a story, every silence holds a secret, and every night brings something you were never meant to see. Tonight, we're diving into 10 terrifying true scary stories, real encounters shared by real people. These aren't ghost tales or urban legends. These are the moments that make you check your locks twice, turn your lights on, and question if you're truly alone right now. If you're brave enough, let's begin. Story 1. The man outside my window. Grew up in a small town where nobody locked their doors. Nights were quiet, predictable, and peaceful. At least, that's what I used to think. Everything changed one cold December night. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I woke up for no real reason. My room was dim, lit only by the weak streetlight from outside. As I shifted to get comfortable, my eyes drifted to the window across from my bed. Someone was standing there. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe it was my reflection. Maybe I was still half asleep. But then the figure leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the glass. Peering inside, my heart completely stopped. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't some creature. He was just a normal man, and that made it 10 times scarier. His face was pale, stretched into a disturbing smile that felt wrong, unnatural. Like he wasn't smiling at me. He was smiling because of me. I froze, couldn't scream, couldn't move. Then slowly, he lifted his hand and tapped the window. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Like he wanted me to know he saw me. Like he wanted me awake. I slid off my bed and crawled to the corner of my room, keeping as silent as possible. The tapping continued for seconds that felt like hours. And then it stopped. Silence. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps along the side of the house, something brushing against the wall, and then nothing. I didn't dare look. I bolted to my parents' room shaking. My dad grabbed a bat and ran outside, but by the time he got there, the man had vanished. The only proof of him were the smudged handprints on my window. Huge, oily marks that didn't match anyone in the house. We called the police the next morning. They checked the area. They asked around. Nothing. No suspicious activity. No footprints. No leads. But a week later, the officers came back with news that still gives me chills. Apparently, similar reports were popping up all over nearby towns. A man staring into bedroom windows between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Always silent. Always smiling. Always disappearing before anyone approached. He was never caught. Even today, years later, whenever I wake up in the middle of the night, the first thing I do is check the window, just to make sure that smile isn't waiting for me again. Story 2, the girl waiting behind the bathroom door. This story happened to a guy named Aaron when he was in college. It's one of those experiences that sounds small until you imagine it happening to you. Then it becomes something you'll never forget. Aaron lived in an old rented house near his campus. The place was cheap, the walls were thin, and the pipes made weird noises almost every night. He didn't mind. He was a quiet guy who mostly kept to himself. But the bathroom in that house, that was the part he always hated. The door never closed properly. It didn't lock. And sometimes, late at night, it would swing open by itself, just a few inches. Just enough to be creepy. One evening, around 11:45 p.m., Aaron got out of bed to brush his teeth before sleeping. His roommates were all gone for the weekend, so he was alone in the house. He turned on the bathroom light, stepped inside, and closed the door behind him. He brushed his teeth like normal, washed his face, and grabbed a towel. And that's when he noticed something strange. The bottom of the door, a small gap across the floor, was completely dark. Normally, he could see the dim hallway light leaking through. But now, it was pitch black, as if someone was standing right outside the door, blocking the light. He froze, staring at that darkness. For a few seconds, he thought it might just be the bulb flickering or his eyes playing tricks on him. But then, the door handle moved. Not violently, not aggressively, just a small, slow turn. Someone was on the other side. Aaron whispered, "Hello? Who's there?" No answer. He slowly backed away, keeping his eyes on the handle. And then, someone whispered back, just one word, a soft, muffled, Hippen. His blood ran cold. It wasn't his roommate's voice. It wasn't a man's voice. It sounded like a teenage girl, young, shaky, almost pleading. But Aaron lived in a house full of guys. No one else had a key. No one else should have been inside. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at that door, waiting for something to happen. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 gentle taps on the bathroom door. He stumbled backward, knocking over the trash bin. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. The handle turned again, this time harder, like whoever was outside was getting impatient. He quickly searched for anything he could use as a weapon, but there was nothing except a toothbrush and a shampoo bottle. Then, suddenly, the tapping stopped. The handle stopped moving, and the darkness under the door slowly returned to normal as the hallway light reappeared, meaning whoever was standing there was now gone, or so he hoped. He waited and waited. 5 minutes felt like a lifetime. Finally, he gathered the courage to crack the door open. The hallway was empty, but there was something on the floor right outside the bathroom. A small, wet handprint, a child-sized handprint. Aaron grabbed his keys and ran out of the house wearing nothing but his shorts. He didn't return until his roommates came back the next morning. They checked the house top to bottom. No signs of a break-in, no footprints, nothing. But one thing still bothers him. 3 months later, when they moved out, the landlord casually mentioned something. Years ago, a little girl drowned in the bathtub of that bathroom. Since then, tenants keep saying they hear her at night. Aaron didn't respond, but he knew exactly what he heard that night. A girl, standing inches away, waiting quietly behind the bathroom door. Story 3, the stranger in the parking lot who knew my name. This happened to a woman named Claire when she was 21. She told the story years later, but even then, her voice still shook when she talked about it. At the time, she worked the evening shift at a small family-owned supermarket. Her shift ended at 10 p.m., and because she didn't have a car, she always walked across a large, dimly lit parking lot to catch the bus. Most nights were uneventful, but one night, someone was waiting. It was a Wednesday, and the store had been unusually quiet. When her shift ended, Claire waved goodbye to her manager, stepped outside, and instantly felt a strange heaviness in the air. The parking lot lights flickered, as if they were struggling to stay alive. She pulled her jacket tighter and started walking. Halfway to the bus stop, she noticed a man standing beside a dark sedan. The car was parked far away from the store entrance, too far to be waiting for anyone. The man wasn't doing anything. He was just standing still, facing her direction. Claire tried not to look, but couldn't help glancing again. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, dressed in dark clothing, but what scared her most was the way he was positioned. Completely still, hands in his pockets, face tilted slightly like he was studying her. She walked faster. Her footsteps echoed across the empty lot. She kept her head down until she reached the bus stop, relieved when she saw 2 other people waiting there. But just as she sat down, she looked back one last time. The man was gone. At first, she thought maybe he had left. But then she saw something that made her stomach turn. He wasn't gone. He was walking toward the bus stop. Slowly, deliberately, like he knew exactly where she went. Claire's heartbeat skyrocketed. She tried to calm herself. Maybe he was just a normal guy heading home. But when he got closer, her fear turned into absolute terror, because the man smiled at her, a wide, unsettling smile. And then he said her name. Good night, Claire. Her entire body froze. No one at the bus stop knew her. She had never seen this man before. And hearing her name whispered in that low, almost amused voice made her feel like she had been watched for much longer than just tonight. She tried to speak, but no words came out. The man leaned slightly closer, keeping that same disturbing smile. You should be more careful walking alone. That was it. He didn't threaten her. He didn't touch her. He just turned around and walked back into the parking lot, disappearing behind the rows of abandoned cars. The bus arrived a minute later, and Claire practically ran onto it. She didn't sleep that night. Her mind kept replaying the way he said her name. The next day, she told her manager. They checked the security cameras. What they saw was far worse than anything she expected. The man had been sitting in the parking lot, watching her for over an hour before she came out. No headlights, no engine running, no phone. Just sitting still, staring at the store entrance. And even worse, when he whispered her name at the bus stop, the cameras caught one more detail. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at her name tag pinned to her jacket, something she didn't even realize she was wearing. But here's the part that still haunts her. When he walked away, he didn't head toward a car. He walked into the darkness at the far end of the lot, and then he simply vanished from the cameras. To this day, she has no idea who he was, what he wanted, or why he was waiting for her. But she knows one thing. If those two strangers hadn't been at the bus stop that night, he probably would have done a lot more than just say her name. Story 4. The Whisper Under My Bed at 3 a.m. This story comes from a guy named Daniel who shared it anonymously online because even years later, he still can't sleep without checking under his bed. Daniel was 16 when this happened. He lived in a quiet suburban house with his mom and younger sister. Nothing strange ever happened there. No ghost stories, no bad history, nothing. But one night changed everything. It was a school holiday, so Daniel stayed up late playing games. By the time he finally turned off his lights, it was around 3:05 a.m. He wasn't scared or anything, just tired. He lay down, pulled his blanket up, and closed his eyes. Maybe a minute later, he heard something. A voice, a whisper, coming from under his bed. At first, he thought he was dreaming or half asleep, but then he heard it again, clearer this time. "Daniel, are you awake?" He jolted up instantly. His room was dark, but he could see the faint outline of the furniture. His heart was pounding, and every hair on his body was standing straight. He waited, listening. Silence. Maybe it was his imagination. Maybe he'd been slipping into a dream. He slowly lay back down. Another whisper, this time louder, right under his ear. "Don't move." Daniel froze, terrified. He didn't know what to do. If he screamed, he was scared the thing under the bed would grab him. If he climbed out, it might pull him down. He stayed completely still, barely breathing. Minutes passed like hours. Then, a sound. Something shifted under the bed, slowly, dragging across the floor. Daniel's heart thudded violently. He could feel tears filling his eyes. He wanted to run. He needed to run. But his body refused to move. Then the whisper came again, softer, but much closer. "I'm waiting." He couldn't hold it anymore. He jumped out of the bed, sprinted to the door, and flipped the lights on. Nothing under the bed. Nothing in the corners, nothing in the room. But the moment he turned the light on, he noticed something that still haunts him. His blanket, the one he had been sleeping under, was hanging over the side of the bed. Something underneath could have easily touched it, or pulled it, or grabbed him. He ran to his mom's room crying. She didn't believe the whisper part, but she let him sleep there for the rest of the night. The next morning, Daniel checked his room again. Still nothing unusual, but at school, he mentioned it to one of his classmates. And that classmate said something that made Daniel's blood run cold. "You shouldn't hang your feet or your blanket over the bed at night. My grandma used to say, something lives under beds. It waits until 3 a.m. to talk to you." Daniel didn't believe superstitions, but he made sure his blanket never touched the floor again. He thought the nightmare was over, but 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, he wasn't sleeping. He was lying in bed with his phone, lights off, scrolling through messages. It was exactly 3 a.m. when he heard it. A whisper, but not from under the bed. It was right behind him. "Found you." Daniel ran out of his room again, and after that night, he refused to sleep there for almost a month. He still hears whispers sometimes. Soft ones, barely audible. But he'll never forget the one thing he realized later. That first night, he heard the whisper under the bed while he was lying on the side closest to it. Whatever whispered to him was inches away from his face. Story 5. The night someone knocked from inside my closet. This story happened to a woman named Rachel when she moved into her first apartment alone. It was a small studio on the 3rd floor of an old building. Cheap rent, decent area, nothing suspicious. The only weird thing was the closet. A tall, narrow wooden door that always seemed colder than the rest of the room. Rachel brushed it off as her imagination, but within a month, she regretted ever moving there. It started small. Some nights, she would hear soft noises, scratching, tapping, shifting, coming from the closet. She assumed it was rats. The building was old, so it made sense. But the first truly terrifying moment happened on a rainy Thursday night. Rachel was lying in bed, scrolling on her phone. The storm outside was loud, but around 2:30 a.m., she heard something louder. Knock. A single knock. She froze. It didn't come from the main door. It came from the closet. She waited, listening carefully, hoping she imagined it. Knock. Knock. 2 more. Slow, deliberate taps, like someone using their knuckles, from the inside. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She stared at the closet, barely breathing. The door was closed, but she swore for a moment. She saw it tremble slightly. She whispered, "Hello?" No response. She slowly got up, grabbed her phone, and turned on the flashlight. The room filled with a weak, shaky beam of light. She stepped closer to the closet. Her hand reached for the doorknob. And then, knock. Knock. Much louder this time, much closer, almost angry. She stumbled backward and nearly tripped over her bed. Her hands were shaking, her breath short and uneven. She ran to the main door and waited there, listening. Silence. For 10 minutes, complete silence. Finally, she gathered the courage to open the closet door. She pulled it open quickly, half expecting something to jump out. But there was nothing. No animal, no hole in the wall, no loose pipes hitting the wood. Nothing that could be knocking. Just a pile of clothes and a few boxes. She left the closet open overnight, hoping it would stop the fear. But things only got worse. Almost every night at around 2:30 to 3 a.m., she heard tapping. Sometimes light, sometimes strong enough to shake the door. Sometimes she even heard breathing. Slow, heavy breathing from inside it. The final straw happened a month later. Rachel had fallen asleep early after a long day. Around 3 a.m., something woke her. 3 rapid knocks. Knock, knock, knock. She turned toward the noise and saw something that froze her blood. The closet door was slowly opening. Not fully, just a few inches. Enough to reveal darkness inside. A darkness deeper than the rest of the room. Rachel held her breath, and then, very faintly, she heard a whisper. A raspy, dry voice coming from inside the closet. "Let me out." Rachel grabbed her keys and ran out of the apartment in tears. She didn't return until the sun came up. And even then, she didn't go in alone. Her friend came with her that morning. Nothing inside, nothing touched, nothing moved. But when they checked the closet door, they both noticed something chilling. On the inside surface, scratched into the wood, were long, uneven marks, like fingernails, or someone trying to claw their way out. Rachel moved out the next week. She never found out what lived inside that closet. But she knows one thing for sure. It wasn't trying to get in. It was trying to get out. Story 6. The man who watched me sleep through the window. This story happened to a guy named Kevin when he was 24. He had just moved into a small ground floor apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The place was cheap, and the landlord seemed friendly enough. The only thing Kevin didn't like was the bedroom window. It faced a narrow alley, barely 2 meters from the next building's wall. But he kept the curtains closed, so it wasn't a big deal. Or at least, he thought it wasn't. One night around 1 a.m., Kevin woke up feeling cold. He reached for the blanket and noticed something strange. The curtain was slightly open. Just a small gap, maybe 2 inches. He didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he'd left it that way earlier. He pulled it shut and went back to sleep. The next night, the same thing. The curtain was open. 2 inches, perfectly straight. He closed it again. It happened a third night and a fourth. But on the 5th night, it wasn't open when he went to sleep. It opened after he fell asleep. Around 3 a.m., he felt a cold breeze brush his face. He slowly opened his eyes. The curtain was wide open. This time, he felt panic crawl up his spine. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and scanned the window. Nothing there. Nothing outside. Nothing unusual, except his own reflection. He closed the curtain tightly and tried to sleep again. But the next morning, when he went outside to take the trash out, he noticed something disturbing. Right outside his bedroom window, in the dirt, were footprints. Bare footprints, pointed toward his window, like someone had been standing there, watching. Kevin's stomach twisted. He decided to install a cheap motion sensor camera outside the window. Not high quality, just something basic he ordered online. The camera arrived the next day. He set it up, pointed directly at the window, and went to sleep. That night, at 3:18 a.m., the camera sent a notification to his phone. Motion detected. Kevin's hands shook as he opened the video. It was the alley outside his window. At first, the feed was empty. Then, a shape moved into frame. A man, tall, thin, wearing a dirty hoodie. He walked slowly toward Kevin's bedroom window, not like a drunk guy, not confused. He walked like he knew exactly where he was going. He leaned in, placing his face inches from the glass, and stayed there, still, motionless, just staring inside Kevin's room for 6 minutes. Then he did something that made Kevin nearly throw up. The man reached out, grabbed the curtain through the tiny gap, and gently pulled it open wider, like he had done it before, like he knew Kevin would be asleep. Kevin slammed his lights on and called the police immediately. When they arrived, the man was gone. But there was something else, something more disturbing. The police checked the outside wall and found smudges on the glass. Face smudges, as if someone had pressed their forehead, cheeks, and lips against Kevin's window, night after night. The officers told him the guy was likely a stalker or someone targeting random homes. Kevin moved out within a week. But the part that still haunts him is this. When the police officers reviewed the footage frame by frame, one of them asked Kevin a chilling question. "Do you ever leave your window unlocked?" Kevin shook his head. "Never." The officer paused the video. He zoomed in on the man's hand pulling the curtain open. "That's weird," the officer muttered. "What?" Kevin asked. The officer pointed at the screen. "He's not pulling the curtain from the outside. He's pulling it from inside your room." To this day, Kevin doesn't know how the man entered his apartment. He doesn't want to know. All he knows is someone stood over him while he slept, close enough to touch him, close enough to breathe on him, and the thought that scares him the most. He has no idea how many nights the man was inside before he finally noticed the curtain. Story 7. The footsteps on the roof that followed me home. I always believed that when you go home, you leave the outside world behind. But what followed me home one night proved me wrong. It happened 3 months ago when I returned late from work. It was almost 1:20 a.m., that hour where everything feels empty, even if the world is technically still awake. I live in a quiet area, no noisy neighbors, no stray animals, no traffic. Just a single row of houses and a few dim streetlights that flicker more than they shine. That night, as I walked to my gate, I heard a faint thud from above my house. At first, I ignored it. Maybe a cat, maybe a bird. But the next sound wasn't normal. Thud. 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 Slow, heavy footsteps walking across my roof. Not animal-like, not random, not scampering. These footsteps sounded like someone pacing. I froze on the pathway, my key still in my hand. I stared up at the roof, but it was just black darkness and the faint orange glow of the streetlight. No movement, no silhouette. I finally went inside and locked the door, but the footsteps didn't stop. Inside, I could hear it even clearer. One step, pause, another step, pause, almost like someone was listening to where I moved inside the house. I waited, heart racing, until the footsteps slowly shifted to the other end of the roof, then fell silent. I didn't sleep that night. At 12:43 a.m., the footsteps returned. This time, faster, more agitated, like someone was running a hand along the tiles, dragging something heavy. I went outside with a flashlight, shining it at the roof. Nothing. But as I stood there, the footsteps suddenly stopped. And then, I heard it. A low exhale, not mine. Someone, or something, was right above me, barely a meter away. I backed into the house and locked everything again. The footsteps continued until 3 a.m., then stopped. I finally checked my CCTV footage. At exactly 12:43 a.m., the camera shook slightly. Not a glitch, not wind. Something landed on my roof, but there was no visible shape, no shadow, only distortion. Like heat waves bending the image, almost like something invisible. I stayed at a friend's place to escape it, but at 1:15 a.m. he woke me up. "Bro, I'm hearing footsteps on my roof." My blood went cold. It had followed me. That night, we both heard it walking, pacing, dragging itself along the roof like it was searching for a way inside. At one point, something knocked twice directly above us, like it knew exactly where we were sleeping. We stayed awake until sunrise, terrified, listening to the footsteps growing louder and more aggressive. But just before dawn, it stopped. Completely. I don't know who you are. Stop calling me, she said. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then, I saw you brush your teeth tonight. I watched you lock your door. I know you're lying in bed right now, wearing the blue shirt you wore on Monday. Lisa's blood ran cold. She froze, realizing she hadn't shared any of that information with anyone. She hadn't posted it online. No one at work knew. Stop, she shouted, panicking. You don't have to be scared. Yet, the voice whispered. Then the line went dead. Lisa tried calling back. No one answered. She searched the number. It was disconnected. Her hands were shaking as she locked all the doors, pulled all the curtains, and tried to convince herself it was a prank. But it wasn't over, and it never came back. But here's the part that scares me the most. Last week, my friend called. He had new tenants living in that same house, and they complained that every night they hear heavy footsteps walking on the roof. Just like I did. Story 8. The phone call from someone who knew too much. This happened to a woman named Lisa who lived alone in a small apartment. She was in her mid-20s, working late nights at a convenience store. Nothing about her life was unusual until one night when her phone rang at 2:47 a.m. She checked the caller ID. It wasn't a number she recognized, just a random area code from a city she'd never been to. Curious, she answered. Hello, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa, I see you. Her stomach dropped. Who is this? She asked, trying to stay calm. I've been watching you all week. Every night. Her hand trembled. The lights in her apartment suddenly felt too dim, too small, too vulnerable. I don't know who you are. Stop calling me, she said. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then, I saw you brush your teeth tonight. I watched you lock your door. I know you're lying in bed right now, wearing the blue shirt you wore on Monday. Lisa's blood ran cold. She froze, realizing she hadn't shared any of that information with anyone. She hadn't posted it online. No one at work knew. Stop, she shouted, panicking. You don't have to be scared. Yet the voice whispered. Then the line went dead. Lisa tried calling back. No one answered. She searched the number. It was disconnected. Her hands were shaking as she locked all the doors, pulled all the curtains, and tried to convince herself it was a prank. But it wasn't over. The next night, at 3:03 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, the voice said, I'm closer now. I can see your window. You're sleeping with your left side against the pillow. Lisa screamed and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. She called the police, but they said without a traceable number or recording, there was nothing they could do. Lisa didn't sleep for days. Every creak, every hum of the city, every sound outside her apartment felt like it was him. Weeks later, she moved out, changed her phone number, changed her locks, even changed her routine. But she swears that sometimes, when she's alone at night, she hears the faint sound of her old ringtone echoing in the apartment she left behind. And she knows, somewhere, someone is still watching. Story 9. The shadow that stood in my hallway. This story comes from a man named Daniel, who lived alone in a small rental house he found online. The place was cheap, quiet, and close to his workplace. But it came with one problem he didn't notice at first. It was unusually long for such a small house. Narrow, dim, and always colder than the rest of the room. But after the second week, the hallway started to bother him. It started with sounds. Light, shuffling footsteps, like someone dragging their feet across the wooden floor at night. He assumed it was the house settling. But the footsteps didn't come from the ceiling or walls. They came from the hallway. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. One night, he woke up thirsty and walked toward the kitchen. His bedroom door opened directly facing the hallway. When he stepped out, he froze. A shadow was standing at the end of the hall. Not a solid figure, not a person, just a completely black shape in the perfect form of a man. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It didn't react to him. It just stood there, facing him. Daniel blinked hard, thinking his sleepy eyes were playing tricks. But the shadow stayed, perfectly still. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the figure. The shadow didn't disappear. It didn't change. If anything, it looked darker under the light. His heart hammered in his chest. He stepped backwards slowly and locked himself inside his room, barely sleeping until sunrise. The next morning, the hallway was empty. He told himself it was a trick of the light, exhaustion, or a nightmare. But the next night, it got worse. At around 3:19 a.m., he woke up to the sound of breathing, slow, heavy breathing, right outside his bedroom door. Daniel held his breath, terrified. The breathing stopped. Then he heard a soft, deliberate knock. 3 knocks, slow, intentional. He didn't move. Not until sunrise. When he opened the door, his hallway lights were flickering. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. And on the wooden floor, right in front of his bedroom door, he saw something that made his skin crawl. A large, human-shaped black stain, exactly where the shadow had stood the previous night. Daniel tried cleaning it. It didn't go away. Days passed, and the shadow began appearing more often, sometimes at the end of the hall, sometimes closer. Once he saw it standing just inches away from his bedroom door, tall, motionless, waiting. The final night he spent in that house was the one that broke him. He woke up to the sound of someone whispering in his ear. When he opened his eyes, the room was pitch black, but he wasn't alone. A tall, solid black figure was standing next to his bed. No face, no features, just pure darkness. It leaned forward, and in a voice that sounded like it was scraping out of the walls, it whispered, "I finally found you." Daniel ran out of the house barefoot and never returned. 2 months later, new tenants moved in. They lasted only 3 days, because every night, without fail, they saw a tall shadow figure standing in the hallway, watching. Story 10. The apartment above, that was always empty. This story comes from a man named Mark. He had just moved into a small apartment complex in a quiet city neighborhood. It was cheap, clean, and perfect for someone like him, someone who liked living alone. But there was one apartment that always bothered him. It was directly above his unit, number 3B. The building manager always said it was empty. The previous tenant had moved out months ago, and no one had rented it since. But every night, Mark could hear sounds coming from above. At first it was subtle. Footsteps pacing the floor, a chair scraping across the tiles, sometimes the sound of someone walking across the ceiling in socks. Mark knocked on the ceiling once, jokingly, and said, "Hey, can you keep it down?" Nothing. A week later, the sounds became louder, footsteps at 3:17 a.m., followed by a soft dragging noise. Sometimes it felt like the person above was moving furniture, but nobody lived there. One night, Mark's curiosity got the better of him. He went upstairs, pressed his ear against the floor of 3B, and he could hear it clearly. Soft murmuring, whispering words he couldn't understand at first. Then a single phrase cut through the silence. "I see you." Mark jumped back, heart racing. He checked the hallway. The apartment was empty. He returned to his unit and tried to ignore it. But that night, the noises came again. Only this time, it wasn't just above him. It sounded like footsteps were circling his apartment, on the floor, on the walls. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that made the ceiling, the floor, and the walls all vibrate. He checked the cameras he had installed in his hallway. Nothing. But he began noticing strange details. Every morning, the hallway rug in front of his door was slightly shifted. The light switch to 3B was occasionally in the on position, even though no one had touched it. Faint scratches appeared on the ceiling above his bed. One night, desperate, Mark set up his phone on record while he slept. At 3:11 a.m., he woke to the sound of breathing directly above him, slow, heavy, and unnatural. He held the phone above his face and saw something move in the ceiling tiles, like a shadow slipping just beneath the light. Then a voice, whispering, cold and bone-chilling, "You shouldn't be here." Mark ran out of the apartment and didn't come back for weeks. A few months later, he spoke to the building manager. The manager said something that still haunts him. Number 3B has been empty for years. Nobody's lived there, but tenants keep complaining about footsteps, whispers, and even shadows moving through the rooms. Mark never went back. He knows one thing for certain. Whatever lives above that apartment, it's waiting, and it's patient. As you sit there thinking these stories are over, remember this. The world is full of things that watch, wait, and whisper when you think you're safe. Somewhere, right now, A shadow might be pacing above your ceiling. A whisper might be coming from the corner of your room. Or someone might be staring at you without you even knowing. If you think you're safe, think again, because darkness doesn't sleep, and neither do the stories that hide within it. If you want more nightmares, more terrifying true stories, and more spine-chilling encounters that will keep you awake at 3 a.m., subscribe to Dark Vision now and step into the shadows. Turn on notifications, because some stories should never be forgotten.